new comments from John J. Ray III, the now CEO, the acting CEO of defunct exchange FTX. According to John Ray III, who spoke with the Wall Street in his first interview since November, he might reboot old FTX and get it up on its feet again, if that makes sense. Right now, they're going through the creditors, they're looking at all the liabilities and assets on the balance sheet, seeing who needs the money now. But they're thinking this might make sense to boot the exchange back up because it's working product. The exchange itself was actually highly touted by a lot of traders who enjoyed working with the interface. So maybe it's a good way for the creditors to earn some funds. We actually see this happening in a few other Chapter 11 cases throughout the industry, where a few other companies are keeping their cash flows moving by keeping the core businesses alive. This, of course, can't happen during a Chapter 11 bankruptcy because Chapter 11 is restructuring, doesn't necessarily mean that the company is going away. Zach, I want to throw the story over to you. This one caught a lot of people off guard this morning.
Yeah, it's definitely within the realm of possibility, right? Chapter 11 is about restructuring under the protection of a bankruptcy court. Chapter 7, that's the death knell. That's the liquidation chapter. This is not Chapter 7. This is by no means a death knell for these businesses going forward. And it's interesting that John J. III, old Daddy Enron here from those congressional hearings, who came out so gruff and so capable looking, he's saying, hey, we won't be able to stand this thing up because you know what? Some of the mechanics here are actually pretty decent. You talk to traders in the space and they say FTX, when it was working pretty well. Forget about the backdoors. Forget about the huge loan book to Alameda that may have sunk it. Forget about some of the more fraudulent practices that have been unearthed in the last few months. If you go back to the actual basics, the meat and potatoes of how FTX functioned, some traders swore by it. So the fact that this could be trotted out as a way to help make creditors whole is something that is within the realm of possibility, given that this is Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Interestingly, this being crypto, the degens who are trading the FTT token, the relatively worthless FTT token, gave it a big old boost on this news today, sending it up something like 33% as this made the rounds on crypto Twitter. So interesting to see some life maybe in the FTX project going forward. Who knows? This is indeed in the service of filling some big holes in terms of the money that people both on the platform and those who had lent money to it are still seeking, right? So this could help that process. And if John J. Ray III says so, hey, maybe it's real. I'll toss it to Adam. What do you think?
I think first off, we should just say John J. Ray III a lot because that's pretty fun. I got to say that's one of the more fun parts about this story. As far as the possibility of bringing back FTX as an exchange, I think that there's the technical possibility of doing it. I think that all the arguments that you've made are totally valid. I would point out that if you look at the historical sort of context around other exchanges that have held really dominant positions in the industry and then fell from them for one reason or another, I can't really think of a single example where they were able to reclaim the heights that they had achieved before. The one that kind of comes to mind most clearly that might be an example of this is Poloniex, which was basically the dominant exchange during the kind of pre-ICO and early ICO era. And then it was acquired by Circle, and it just became less and less and less important until Circle eventually divested itself of it. It still exists. People still trade on it. Does it matter in the industry? No, it doesn't. And it really used to for a long time. So to my eyes, that's what I see here is everybody loves speculating on this stuff. And clearly when there are tokens involved, then you're going to have lots of people who are betting one way or another. And that's what this game seems like to me more than anything else. But to the extent that they can actually bring it back and use it to generate revenue, that seems like that's a win-win really for everybody. Back over to you, Zach.
Yeah, I like the cultural point. You're right. I think there was a lot of speculation sort of within crypto Twitter and beyond, right? Are there any second acts in crypto history that have actually panned out, right? And you mentioned not many have ever come back from the grave, and those who have sort of return as a shell of their former self. You think BitMEX, you think Polo, you think some of these other firms that are disgraced, and then, through whatever means, they return to some version of operating as normal. But culturally, I think the question is, can it be accepted as something given just the huge, just the huge, ding on its reputation that this whole proceeding has unearthed? Can it come back from that? I think historically the answer tends to be no. There are some coins that go fallow that come back. That's also a rarity in crypto, right? Maybe Ethereum is probably the one that bucks that trend. It was kind of dead for a minute there, came back in a big way come 2020 following that Black Swan event in March. So all this stuff, I think, is part of that cultural conversation. If FTX does come back, can it come back and can it reclaim some of its former glory? I tend to agree with you, Adam, on the fact that that's not likely to happen, even if operationally it ends up generating some money to make former users whole. Adam, I saw your hand, then we'll toss it to Will.
Yeah, just a real quick kind of point on the token side of things. I think that's also really valid and interesting to point out is that there's nobody who turns the lights off for a token that has served its purpose or failed and then died and effectively has no chance of becoming meaningful in the speculative sense that many people imagine that it might be. But what you do find is that tokens don't die; they just get cheap enough that you have these scammers who accumulate a lot of them and then wind up, using them in pump and dumps and stuff like that. So that's less true with companies. It's more true with tokens, but it's something to watch out for, especially as these big names, once disgraced, have a real hard time kind of climbing their way back, and we rarely ever see it. Will, you get the last word on this one.
Yeah, two things I want to bring up really quickly before we go on to the next segment. The first about FTT tokens. So the creditors and the Chapter 11 process here, they found about $5 billion in liquid assets, apparently. But if you look at the breakdown of those liquid assets, the second largest asset on that balance sheet is actually FTT token. And so, that's like just what you said there, Adam. It's kind of can't die. And they're counting that as something that actually has value. And if they liquidated it, people would be buying it. But would they really? So that is bringing up a question here with FTT pump we're seeing right now. The second point to bring up is just SBF's comment to the Wall Street Journal. They texted him about John J. Ray III's comments about booting back up FTX, and he said, "This is a shocking and damning comment from someone pretending to care about customers." Great little line from SBF, living with his parents right now, doom scrolling Twitter like the rest of us. Zach, let's go to the next story, though. We got an even better one.
Hot damn, season 2, really shaping up. Good stuff. What if JJ Ray III was red pilled and he's just pumping FTT to make it more liquid and actually wow, this is crazy. Anyway.